Well, hello everyone. I wasn't actually sort of thinking of or planning to make this video, but a comment I saw recently, and I've seen others like it from time to time, both in response to videos I've put out and other things I've done on forums and things I've said and whatever, made me want to just have a few words about this. First of all, I want to point out that most of you people who watch my videos perhaps haven't met me and only sort of know me through seeing me in the videos, of course. But I'm certainly not a racist for a start off. Having been on the receiving end of racism as a kid, it wasn't very nice, and I can assure you that I wouldn't dish it out to anybody else. So let's just scotch that one straight away. The reason for this is sometimes I remark on the quality of certain parts and components that might come from overseas, often India and China to name the main two. And as far as Indian stuff goes, I've got no problem with that. I've got an Indian Enfield Bullet 350, by the way. I haven't used it on the road for a few years, but I've racked up many miles on it and enjoyed it, and it's a good bike. I tuned it up, it's not standard, and I've owned a few others as well which have come and gone, so I've got nothing against them. I got no interest in the more modern Royal Enfield, the Indian Royal Enfield offerings since the demise of the Bullet. I'm not interested in any modern bikes though, so again, that's not just sort of levelled at the Indian stuff. So the Royal Enfields and quality of parts and components. Well, having owned Indian and British Royal Enfields, I formed the opinion that the old British built ones were made to a better standard and better quality than the Indian Bullets were. The Indian Bullets are okay, but I've often said if it were possible to ride a motorbike with my eyes shut, you could just tell me I'm on a Royal Enfield Bullet, blindfold me, and I'd ride it and I'd tell you whether it was British or Indian, right? But that's me, that's my own take on it. I'm not knocking the Indian Bullets, but there are some Indian parts that are not very good at all, and that brings me to this. And this was actually, these came up in my last video where I mentioned that the cost of chroming these original items would probably be about the same as buying new replacements for them, which was a shame. It's a shame on a few levels actually. It's a shame that it would cost as much to re-chrome this as to buy a new item. That's all wrong, okay? That's a shame, okay? It's a shame that when you do get the new item, it's been made in India. Why is it a shame? It's a shame because unfortunately it's not made here. We don't make stuff like that anymore. And unfortunately, not everything that comes from India is perhaps as good as the old British equivalent was. Now in a case of kickstarts and gear levers and things like that, it shouldn't really be a problem. Although I did hear the tale, well not hear the tale, I was told directly by the guy who was involved in this, and he showed me the damage to his leg where they'd fitted a kickstart of rather poor quality to a BSA A65 of all things, and it snapped. The shank of it snapped when he kicked the BSA engine over, and the shank, the jagged end of the shank, went up into his calf muscle and into his leg, and he had to go to hospital and get it all cleaned out and stitched up. So that's one indirect example I've got. But I've also recently had a couple of big ends fail very early in some Royal Enfield Bullet engines that I've rebuilt with new floating bushes which have expired in around 50 miles. I know that I did my part of the job right, and I know that all the tolerances and measurements and everything were right, but the floating bushes failed very rapidly in about 50 miles. Now make of that what you will. I personally would say that it was a couple of poorly made floating bushes that were the culprits myself. So I lost a bit of faith there. Chinese stuff. Right, well, the Chinese stuff, I used to work on some small Chinese bikes for a couple of, you get local youngsters that use 125s perhaps to get to and from work, and they're starting out in life, and they weren't a bike I wanted to work on, but to sort of help them out, help these youngsters out from time to time. I'd change tyres, brake pads, odd little jobs like that, bit of servicing just to help keep them going, but I wasn't really interested in it. And I met some real bad examples of quality with those. One of which was where a rear wheel, where the sprocket bolts to the rear wheel hub, and it was a cast aluminium hub and wheel all one piece. The sprocket and bolts had actually ripped the metal that the bolts were screwed into out of the hub, and the whole lot had broken off. But I fixed it actually by drilling right through the whole lot and putting bolts right through, but that was potentially dangerous. I've also had examples of brand new non-running Chinese machines brought here. One was a little pit bike, and that wasn't wired up right. Another was a little kid's quad where it wasn't wired up right again, and also a choke lever on its imitation Honda horizontal engine, like a sort of step-through engine. The choke lever couldn't be lifted on the carburettor because it immediately touched the frame tube and couldn't move, so I had to sort of bend that, heat it and bend it. Anyway, these are all sorts of things that I've seen, but the last one, the one that put the tin hat on it for me, was when a Chinese bike was here and I tried to start it. I gave it a kick and it spat back and ignited the carburettor and the intake, and I rushed to put my hand through to try and grab the fuel tap and turn the fuel off, and as I did, in my haste, I knocked the fuel pipe off the fuel tap, so we now had petrol pouring all over an engine that was already on fire. It was in the doorway of the workshop with my father and my brother inside the workshop. I tried to grab the bike and run outside with it. Unfortunately, in the excitement and sheer panic, because this thing was a fireball by now, I tripped and fell, and the bike sort of stayed jammed in the doorway in a fireball while I lay outside with petrol all over me burning, and I also had grazes on my arms and hands from the concrete that I'd fallen on. So, if you don't mind, people, that is why I don't want Chinese bikes in my workshop. Also, I have a 1980 cut-off date, so I'm not interested in anything after that. And I've got nothing against Indian or Chinese people. I don't like Indian food, by the way. I do like Chinese food, but I got no problem with the people from either country. And some of the stuff they make is okay, but some of the stuff that I've encountered is absolute crap. And that is why, if I could, I'd have gone down the road 20 years ago to Ammanford and got these re-chromed. But you know why I can't do it today? Because that company, last time I went to them with things to chrome, they said we can't do that anymore. I said, oh, why is that? Oh, it's these new EU regulations which came in at the time. I mean, we're talking about 15 years ago or so, and we're not up to standard, and to come up to their health and safety standards, we've got to invest a massive sum of money, and we can't afford it, so we're closing down. So there you are. But I could send these off to India probably, and perhaps some 14-year-old kid in t-shirts, shorts and flip-flops will dangle them into a bubbling vat of something and get splashed in all sorts of stuff. That doesn't matter though, because it's cheap and it's not on in our backyard. That is why a lot of our stuff has gone down the pan. But anyway, that wasn't really my point. My point was, it is a shame that you can't get things like these re-chromed at a reasonable price anymore. It is a shame that new items cost no more and probably less than getting these rechromed if I wanted to get them rechromed. It's all a bit arse about face, if you don't mind me saying, really, and I just thought I'd cover that, and just wanted to say it's got nothing to do with me possibly being a racist, which I'm not. It's just the way the world is these days, and it's not always the best way. Thank you.